Masechet Pesachim, Daf Ayin Bet 72. We saw the Mishnah yesterday. We're going to re-quote each section of the Mishnah today. But overall, on Shabbat, that's the 14th of Nisan, one is permitted, according to all opinions, to bring the Korban Tamid and the Korban Musaf that you bring for Shabbat, that obviously. And also you're allowed to bring a Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. That means you designate it for Pesach and you slaughter it for Pesach. That's simple. Everyone agrees to that. Anything else, to bring a Korban Chagiga, we saw that there was one outlying opinion, the guy who went south. But according to everybody else, you can't bring a Korban Chagiga. If you do by mistake, then you have to bring a Korban Chatat. So we're going to see really three opinions. Rabbi Eliezer is the most stringent. And he says if you made a mistake and you've brought a Pesach for a Shelamim or a Shelamim for Pesach, these are all no good. Obviously, we're not talking about someone who does something on purpose, that you purposefully violated Shabbat to do Shechita. And if you did on purpose and you did Shechita, you violated Shabbat, then it would be Chayav Sikila or Karet. All the cases we're talking about today is you made a mistake. Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, you made an honest mistake. Nevertheless, you were negligent. You should have kept track of what kind of animal this is, and you should have known that you can only bring a Pesach for a Pesach. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yehoshua, however, has a leniency. He says, if you were intending to do a mitzvah, and you actually made a valid korban that is a mitzvah, even though it's a korban chagiga that you're not allowed to bring on Pesach, nevertheless, if you ended up fulfilling a mitzvah, it's okay. You might call this the lehavdil, excuse my analogy, the Curious George principle. You know, he always does things naughty, but in the end, it turns out well. If the end turns out well, then you're okay. He's not going to get punished for that. So you don't even have to bring a korban in that case.
Rabbi, but if everyone's bringing a korban pesach, 600,000 people or something bringing korban pesach, and there's one guy mixed in with the wrong, wouldn't the Kohen say something?
Well, it will be a case where you're bringing, let's say I'm bringing several animals. I'm bringing one for Korban Pesach. I'm bringing one for Korban Chagiga that I'm going to use tomorrow, and one I'm going to use on Tuesday. And so now I just got mixed up with the animals. And so I'm just bring the wrong one. Or I think most years I would bring a Pesach and a Chagiga. I forgot that when it's Shabbat, I only bring a Pesach and not a Chagiga, right? So you could have a lot of mistakes, especially it's not the Kohen doing Shechita. It could be you yourself are allowed to do Shechita. So these mistakes could definitely happen. So if we're going to see the Meir is the most lenient, we'll get to him in a few minutes. But the first case is I have a korban, something I designated as a Korban Pesach, and I brought it as a Shelamim. That is liable because it's invalid. But if I had a Shelamim and I brought it for Pesach, that we'll see is more complicated because maybe it remains a Shelamim, and even though I'm not supposed to bring a Shelamim, since it's valid, according to the Yehoshua, would be exempt. All right, so let's discuss these two cases. And the Gemara is going to ask now another question. When I redesignated it, did I know that it was the wrong thing and I redesignated it as the right thing? In this case, Pesach for a peace offering. Or did I was mistaken about what it was in the first place? So let's see. B'may askinan. Ilema beto'eh shamat mina akira beta'ut havya akira. If you say that I didn't realize this was a Pesach offering, that I designated a Pesach offering, I thought it was a Shelamim, and now I do Shechita on it as a Shelamim. So if it's a complete mistake, there is an opinion elsewhere in Shas and Menachot that if I redesignated it or uprooted it mistakenly, then it's not a redesignation. Some say it is. So now in this case, if it was really a ta'ut and you said Pesach offering, and if it was totally by mistake, maybe it should remain a Pesach offering. In other words, I just totally made a mistake. I thought it was a peace offering, so I did that. But according to one opinion, doesn't matter. It's not an uprooting. So that in that case, it's Pesach. And it remains a Pesach because the redesignation was a total mistake. So Pesach for a Pesach should be exempt. It's totally fine, a Pesach for a Pesach. And yet it says liable. So is this a case of to'eh? And can I derive from here that redesignating erroneously does in fact uproot its original designation? If so, I would side with one side of that machloket. But that machloket is a hot debate that's continuing. And so we don't want to have a proof Look how much the Bavli loves debate, that it doesn't, even when it has a proof that could side one side of the debate, it doesn't want to bring it. We'd rather interpret the Mishnah in such a way that it can be open to both sides of the debate. So Ela be'oked, rather the first clause of our Mishnah, when I have a Pesach offering, and we're saying liable, must be that I knew it was a Pesach offering, but I thought that I'm allowed to redesignate it, and I thought I'm allowed to bring a shelamim, and I call it a shelamim. In that case, I tried to bring a Pesach. It ends up being that I brought a shelamim. That's no good. And so therefore, according to everybody, that case would be liable. All right, fine. So the first clause is a case of oked, when I redesignated it, knowing that it's a wrong redesignation, but I thought that is permitted. Okay, if so, emasefa, the second clause, which says, Ushar kol hazevachim sheshechatan l'shum Pesach. I brought something that, for example, was a shelamim. And now I say, you know what? I'm going to make it a Pesach. Im enan re'uyin chayav. If it's a cow or something that cannot be a korban Pesach, chayav. Even though it's a mistake, you only bring a korban chatat for something that's negligent. And so here you are negligent. You should have known that you can't bring a cow as a korban Pesach. So that's not, everyone agrees, no good. You have to bring korban. But if it's a lamb, then it's a reasonable mistake. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev hatat. Rabbi Eliezer says, nevertheless, it's no good because it's the wrong designation. It was a shelamim. You tried to bring it as a Pesach, and so it's not a Pesach. So therefore, chayav chatat. However, the Yehoshua poter. Yehoshua says, it's true. You had in mind that it would be a Pesach. Nevertheless, it remains a valid shelamim. So you weren't supposed to do this, but you ended up doing a mitzvah. Therefore, patur. Okay, now what case is this? I be'oked, you said the first case is I purposely redesignated it, knowing it's the wrong designation. In this case, if it's on purpose, mali reuyin, mali shenan reuyin. According to the Yehoshua, what should be the difference if it was a cow and I brought it as a shela and I brought it now as a Pesach, or if I knew it was a shelamim and I brought it as a Pesach? Those should be the same, and you should be chayav chatat for both of them, right? Because it's not a total mistake. You can't say it's like honest. It should be at least the same as bringing the wrong animal. So now we have a strange thing, right? Because the first clause I explained as oked on purpose, and the second clause doesn't make sense if I say that. Ela peshita beto'eh. The second case must be that I didn't realize that it was a peace offering, and I thought it was a Pesach, and I brought it as a Pesach, and that's why, according to the Yehoshua, he's totally patur. It was a complete mistake, not his fault at all. So it would only make sense if we say resha be'oked v'sefa beto'eh. The first case is when he redesignated it, knowing what the original designation was, and the sefa is when it was completely erroneous. Okay, this was a question. Can it be? And we say yes. In fact, they're talking about two different assumptions in case 1 and 2. First is okay, the second is to'eh. And we're going to bring a proof for this. Okay, remember the story when this Rabbi Yitzchak was with Rabbi Abhu, and they were in the big crowd. They were walking around with a lot of people. Amar le matnitin mai, and while they're walking around, they see he asked, this Mishnah, what is the case of the Mishnah? Okay, it doesn't really matter that they were in a big crowd. He's just like he's showing how well he remembers. I remember exactly where I was when I asked Rabbi Abu this question, and he told me, Amar le resha be'oked v'sefa beto'eh. In fact, yes, the first case was when he knowingly redesignated it, and the sefa was when he unwittingly redesignated it. In fact, we repeated it. He repeated it to me 40 times, and by the 40th time, it was like in my pocket. I had that tradition very well, really solid. Okay, so by the way, if you feel a little bit confused, don't feel bad. Even Rabbi Yitzchak had to review this 40 times until he totally grasped it. Okay, so that's that. Therefore, this is for sure. This is the way that it has been interpreted. They're talking about two different cases. All right, so that seems fine, right? So Pesach, when I take up something that was a Pesach and I make it a peace offering, this case was an intentional, and that's why it's liable. And the peace offering that I made for a Pesach, that was unwitting, and that's why, according to the Yehoshua, the person is exempt. It ends up being a valid peace offering, so it's okay. But now we're going to ask a question from the next part of the Mishnah, which I labeled C. Rabbi Eliezer brings a kal vahomer. If A is liable, he says, then for sure B. Yeah, but the kal vahomer, you can't make a kal vahomer if the first one is intentional and the second is unwitting, because maybe the first one is liable because it's intentional, and the second one would not be liable because it's unwitting. So how could you make a kal vahomer if they're talking about two different assumptions? All right, that's going to be our next question. Tenan. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, next part of our Mishnah. Ma im Pesach shemutar lishmo kesheshina et shemo chayav. Or korban Pesach that I bring as a korban Pesach would be fine. But when I change it to a peace offering, chayav. That's the first case. Zevachim shehen asurin lishman. Now, if I bring a peace offering, and I actually a peace offering, I actually bring it as a peace offering, it's no good because Shabbat, and we don't bring a peace offering on Shabbat. And now I take this peace offering and I redesignate it. I do shechita wrongly. That sounds like it should be even worse. So all the more so I should be chayav. Okay, so that's Rabbi Eliezer's kal vahomer. And now we ask, Vim ita, and if it's true that the first case is talking about when I did it on purpose, knowingly. Second case, when I was to'eh, the two cases are not similar to each other at all. You cannot make this kal vahomer. Okay, so to answer that, Rabbi Eliezer la shani le. Truth is, for Rabbi Eliezer, they're both chayav. So for Rabbi Eliezer, he wouldn't have to. It wouldn't make a difference. So in other words, according to Rabbi Eliezer, both of them can be intentional cases, right? Both the first and the second. We only had to say the second one was unwitting, according to Rabbi Yehoshua. So Rabbi Eliezer says, for me, they're both intentional uprooting, and they're both liable. So my kal vahomer was only directed to you. But according to Rabbi Yehoshua, who does make a distinction between the first case and second case, the first one is liable, the second one is exempt, and he says the first one is intentional, and the second one is unwitting, he should be able to reject Rabbi Eliezer's contradiction, kal vahomer, because they're talking about two different cases. And so, yes, in fact, that's what he does. Hachika amar le ledidi ladame. Resha beoker v'sefa beto'er. Rabbi Yehoshua responds back to him, for me, it makes no difference, right? For me, the kal vahomer is rejected because Resha and Sefa are two different cases. Ledidach, lo, im amart b'Pesach sheshinat shemo ledavar asur, tamar bezvachim sheshinat sheman ledavar hamutar. But according to you, that you say both are liable, why? Right then I have a challenge to your kal vahomer. If regarding a Pesach, when I change the name when I change the designation from Pesach, which is allowed, to Shelamim, which is not allowed to bring on Shabbat, right? And that's liable. You can't compare that to a case of Shelamim that I change its name to a Pesach, which is permitted, right? Just because not all changing names are the same. Changing name to something better should be better. And the second clause is changing a Shelamim to a Pesach. That's better. So that's why I say that patur in that case. Okay, so good. We're able to explain that kal vahomer. But now we get to the next section, which is the question and answer to be Eliezer and Yehoshua from communal offerings. So here we're now going to quote the next part of the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, emoreh sibur yochichu shehen mutarin lishman v'ashochet lishman hayav. The communal offerings like korban tamid, those are, then this is right, that those everyone agrees, if you do take a communal offering and you do it lishman, and if you take another animal that was not designated as a korban tamid, and you say, I'm going to make this a korban tamid, everyone agrees that would be chayav. Actually, we're going to see not everyone. Rabbi Meir says no. But Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua both agree that if you take the wrong animal and make it a korban tamid, then chayav. And so therefore, the same thing should be if I take a shelamim and make it a Pesach, also should be chayav. So, which is what Rabbi Eliezer thinks. How about Rabbi Yehoshua? Why would you make a distinction between those two cases? אמר רבי יהושע, לא, אם אמרת באמורי ציבור שכן יש להם קצבה, תאמר בפסח שאין לו קצבה, Rabbi Yehoshua, there's a big difference. How many korban tamid do you bring in a day? 2. That's it. So therefore, you should look around. Who's bringing the korban tamid? There's a kohen over there who says, I got it. I got the korban tamid. Good. Once you know that, then no, you shouldn't make a mistake and say, I'm also going to bring korban tamid. There's only 2 in the whole Bet HaMikdash. So therefore, if someone brings a wrong animal and makes it a korban tamid, that person we will hold liable because there's a limit to them. But not so Pesach, where there's thousands of korban Pesach that are around. And so now if I take an animal that was a shelamim and mistakenly make it a Pesach, then that's an honest mistake. And it's not even negligent. And that person should not be held liable, right? There's thousands of them. And so there's no way to keep track. It's very difficult to keep track of all of them. And so that's the distinction between them. All right, that makes a lot of sense. But now we're going to compare it to yet another case. All right, this is really a Talmudic sugya, right? We're really dissecting the details of various cases that are very similar to each other, but a little bit different. So now you're going to make a general principle that anytime there's a limit on the number of things, so you should be able to keep track. And so since you should be able to keep track, and if you make a mistake, you would be chayav, according to the Yehoshua, right? And that's why Pesach is okay, is not liable, whereas Korban Tamid is liable. Okay, what about 2 babies that get mixed up regarding Brit Milah on Shabbat? Right? How many babies are there that the mohel has to do? 1, 2. Utnan. Mi shayu lo shene tinokot. Echad lo achar Shabbat, ve'echad lo b'Shabbat. You have 2 babies. They're right next to each other in the hospital, right? One of them was born on Sunday, and therefore the Brit Milah will be on Sunday. One was born on Shabbat, and therefore you would do Brit Milah on Shabbat. V'shachach umal et shel achar Shabbat b'Shabbat hayav. And the mohel took the wrong baby, and he took the Sunday baby and did the Brit Milah on Shabbat. Then he has to bring a korban chatat for violating Shabbat, right? He was mechabel. He caused a wound to bleed on Shabbat. So why in this case? Because he didn't actually perform any mitzvah. The Sunday baby is only a 7th day. There's no mitzvah to do a Brit Milah on the 7th day. So he violated Shabbat without even performing a mitzvah. Okay, he did it by mistake, but he was negligent, and therefore that person is hayav. However, here's where the question comes from. Again, I have 2 babies. One of them was born on Friday, so the Brit Milah should be on Friday, but the baby was sick, so we didn't do Brit Milah. There's another baby there that was born on Shabbat, and therefore would have to be done on Shabbat. So the one that should have been done on Friday but delayed, in that case, you have to wait till Sunday, right? Because you only violate Shabbat for an 8-day baby when that's the 8th day. But he made a mistake. He took the one that should have been on Friday, that really he should wait till Sunday, and he did it on Shabbat. In that case, Rabbi Eliezer says chayav chatat, because Rabbi Eliezer is machmir on this. Anytime you make a mistake and you weren't actually allowed to do that, you have to bring a korban chatat. However, Rabbi Yehoshua says you did a mitzvah. The one that was supposed to be on Friday now is already the 9th day. So when you do Brit Milah, it is in fact a mitzvah of Brit Milah. You shouldn't have done that. You should have waited till Sunday, but it's a mistake, and you performed the mitzvah, so you're okay. And he's patur. Good, that fits Rabbi Yehoshua's general principle. But here's the problem. In this case, it's a limited number. There's only 2 babies there, right? This is the same as the korban tamid. There's only a couple of animals that will be a korban tamid. You should have been more careful, and this is you shouldn't make a mistake like that, right? Figure out which baby is which. It's not like when there's thousands of korban Pesach. So here we have a contradiction. To Rabbi Yehoshua, how can he resolve the korban tamid and the case of these 2 babies? Okay, how come korban tamid would be chayav, and the babies, he says, patur. Amar Rabbi Ameh, hacha b'maiskinan, kegon shekadam umal et shel erev Shabbat b'Shabbat, diika hach de Shabbat eterid be. Hacha kegon shekadam ushchatinhu lemore sibur beresha. So the Rebbe has a brilliant answer. It depends on the order in which you did it. In this case, when Rabbi Yehoshua says patur regarding Brit Milah, it must be a case where he went and he took the Friday baby first and did the Brit Milah on Shabbat. Because he's all thinking about, he says, oh, I have to do something on Shabbat. I have to do Brit Milah on Shabbat. And so he's thinking about that and he got the wrong one. But in the case of the Korban Tamid, that's talking about a case where the Kohen already did a Korban Tamid, right? And it's finished. So, and in that case, he should not have been thinking about the Korban Tamid anymore. And so he goes and gets another animal and yet designates it as a Korban Tamid and does Shechita as a Korban Tamid. In that case, Chayav. Let me see, it's really the order. In this case also, if he did Brit Milah on the correct baby first, the Shabbat baby, and then he goes and gets the other one. No, there's no excuse for that, right? Then in that case, Chayav, you should have known. I did my Brit Milah for the day. That's it. I don't have to do any Brit Milah anymore. It's only when you didn't do the correct one first, that's when you say, oh, I have to do something. And we understand, we're more understanding that he got the wrong one. As long as he actually did a mitzvah, it would be patur. Okay, so that through that further case, we're able to get yet another fine distinction, and according to the Yehoshua's opinion. Rabbi Meir Omer. Okay, now we're going to go to the next clause of the Mishnah, which is Rabbi Meir, because he says, patur. If I take a wrong animal that was not designated as a Korban Tamid, but I thought it was, and I said this is going to be a Korban Tamid, he says patur even in that case, even though it's limited. So you see, the Meir is much more lenient. Now we ask, you just said that the whole Mishnah is talking about a case where I already did the Korban Tamid, the correct Korban Tamid, and now I went and found another animal. That's what the Yehoshua would say, Chayav. Now you're telling me that according to the Meir, even in that case, when some Kohen already did Korban Tamid, and I should have known it's done, and yet I go and get another animal, make another Korban Tamid, still patur, right? So we're going to answer the Meir yes, but we have to explain why. It's really based on another principle. The Meir's principle we're going to see in a few minutes right now is that once I'm allowed to violate Shabbat for something, then anything I do within that is permitted, and that order doesn't matter. But we're going to prove it from the following Baraita. The following Baraita is confusing, but we're going to fix it. Okay, so if you're confused, then you understand it. V'hatanya, Rabbi Chaya me'abel adav amar Rabbi Meir. So this is Rabbi Meir reporting. Lo nechleku Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yehoshua al shahiyu lo shetenim tinokot. Echad lamol erev Shabbat, v'echad lamol bas Shabbat. V'shachach umal shel erev Shabbat b'Shabbat dechayav. It says even Rabbi Yehoshua agrees. When you have two babies, and one was supposed to be on Friday, but it was sick and you didn't get to do it, and the other one was supposed to be on Shabbat, and you forgot it, you took the Friday baby and did that one, that would be chayav. Okay, this is the opposite of what we just said. Alma nechleku al shayu lo shene tinokot echad amol achar Shabbat v'echad amol b'Shabbat. When is there a machloket? When you have a Shabbat baby and a Sunday baby. You took the Sunday baby and did it on Shabbat on this, which is his seventh day. Did Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatat? Did Rabbi Yehoshua poter? Rabbi Yehoshua says it's patur in that case. Now this seems very strange because it should be the opposite. What? If in the second case, when he didn't do mitzvah, because it's only the seventh day, and Rabbi Yehoshua says patur, and this in the first case, when he actually did a mitzvah, because that's the ninth day for the Friday baby, he would say chayav. This doesn't make sense. Rather, we have to understand the first case differently. The first case here was talking about when I took the Shabbat baby and he made double mistake. He took the Shabbat baby and he did the Brit Milah on Friday, thinking that was the Friday baby. And then on Shabbat, he takes the one that was the Friday baby and does that one. So this is a case where he would, even the Yehoshua would say that person would be hayav because he was not allowed to violate Shabbat at all, right? Because the Shabbat baby he already did on Friday. So that's it. There's no more brit milah for that one. And so now he goes and takes a baby that was not supposed to be on Shabbat and does it on Shabbat. It's not even the case of getting mixed up because it's a totally different day. As he says, explains now, Shelo nitena Shabbat lidchot, v'sefa nitna Shabbat lidchot etzlo. So in the first case, he was not allowed to violate Shabbat at all because there was no Shabbat baby. He did the Shabbat baby already, and therefore chayav. Whereas the one that has a Shabbat and a Sunday baby, since he was allowed to violate Shabbat for the Shabbat baby, even though he made a mistake and got the Sunday baby, still it's okay and it's patur. That's all the Rabbi Meir's understanding. So we can apply that here also. In this case too, since you're allowed to bring a korban tamid on Shabbat, so then the order doesn't matter. Even if someone already, according to the Rabbi Meir, even if someone already brought the korban tamid, and then another kohen goes and takes the wrong animal and makes it a korban tamid, he's patur because Shabbat was already allowed to be violated for Korban Tamid, and the order does not matter. Okay, so that's how we explain to be Meir. And just last question on him. Wait a second, in this case too, somewhere in the world, there's some baby that is his 8th day, and therefore this Shabbat can be violated for some baby, and therefore, even though it's not in my city, when I go and take this one that was a Friday baby and do it on Shabbat, still it should be okay because this Shabbat was permitted to be violated for some baby in the world. No, you can't go by the whole world. We're talking about this mohel. This mohel. Did you have a baby you needed to do on Shabbat? If so, then it's okay. You're patur if you did the wrong baby. But if you, this mohel, had no baby to do on Shabbat, then he went and mistakenly found one, then he would be hayav. Okay, so that explains Rabbi Meir that Rabbi Meir's principle is once Shabbat may be violated, then that person is exempt. Okay, so we have basically 3 opinions. We're going to see more about Rabbi Meir, but the 3 opinions so far is Rabbi Eliezer that says only if you do the correct thing, the correct designation for the correct Pesach for Pesach, then it's okay, obviously. But anything else is no good. If it's not a valid Korban Pesach, even if it's a valid Shelamim, you're chayav. According to the Yehoshua, as long as you intended to do mitzvah and you did a mitzvah, that person is patur. If it's unlimited, if it's limited, then he wouldn't. And Rabbi Meir says, even if it's limited, once you're allowed to violate Shabbat for something and you made a mistake, you're also patur. All right, good. So that's what we have so far. And now we're going to see some more cases regarding Rabbi Meir. All right, we go back and quote that same part of the Mishnah we did already. Ushar kol hazevachim sheshechatan l'shum Pesach, imenan re'uyin chayav, im re'uyin Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatat, v'Rabbi Yehoshua poter. If I take a non-Pesach animal, shalamim, and I say this is going to be a Pesach, if it's a cow or something that cannot be a Korban Pesach, chayav, you should have known better. If it is something that could have been an animal that could have been Korban Pesach, so honest mistake, Rabbi Eliezer says chayav anyway. Rabbi Yehoshua says patur because it'll end up being a valid shelamim. Now, who makes a distinction? Man tana deshanele ben reuyin leshenan reuyin. Who says that there's a distinction between animals that are fit and not fit? Well, it's Rabbi Shimon, as we see in the following baraita. D'tanya achad zebachim hareuyin v'achad zebachim shenan reuyin. V'chen hashochet l'shem emoreh sibur patur divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir makes no distinction. Even if it's the wrong animal, even if it's for Korban Tamid, Rabbi Meir says patur in any case. Right? Once you are allowed to violate Shabbat for something, then any mistake is understandable. Amar Rabbi Shimon, lo nechleku Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yehoshua al shenan reuyin shechayav. Rabbi Eliezer says no. If it's an improper animal that could not be a Korban Pesach, then they would agree chayav. They only disagree when it's an animal that could have been a Korban Pesach, according to its species. Okay, good. So now we know that Rabbi Meir, we understand him a little better. אמר רב בוואי, אמר רבי אלעזר, פוטר היה רבי מאיר, אפילו עגל של זבחי שלמים, ששחטו לשום Pesach. Look how far the Rabbi Meir would go. Even if you take an egel, a calf, that was going to be a korban shelamim, and you made it a Pesach, even then, even though it's like a completely different animal, it's not like it's a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, maybe it's hard to figure out, but this is a completely wrong species. Nevertheless, Rabbi Meir says, it's okay, patur. Amar Rabbi Zera l'Rav Bevai. Yohanan modeh Rabbi Meir be'ba'alei mumin. Okay, there is one place where even Rabbi Meir would be machmir, and that's if the animal has a blemish. If it has a blemish, then you can't say, "Oh, I didn't know." This is not. If it has a blemish, it cannot be a korban at all for anything. In that case, if you mistakenly brought it, it'd be chayav. Okay, why? Because a ba'amum, he's not thinking about it. He's not preoccupied with it. He knows a ba'amum, this is not a sacrifice at all. The difference is that a calf, he says, oh, this calf is a korban. He knows that it's korban. And he just gets mixed up that it's not a shelamim. He thought it's supposed to be a shelamim. He thought it's a Pesach. So that's a smaller mistake, and that's an excusable mistake. It's smaller than something has a blemish where he should not be considering it as a korban at all. And if he does, then that's really negligent. So he has to bring korban. Good. Cholin l'shum Pesach mali amar Rabbi Meir. Okay, now a smaller distinction. What about an unconsecrated animal? So it doesn't have a blemish, but it was not consecrated as anything. And he goes and says, I'm going to make this korban Pesach. What would Rabbi Meir say about that case? He's so lenient, even though it's not an animal at all that he designated. It's not consecrated animal. Still, he thought it was a korban Pesach. It's okay. He's patur. Wait, what's the difference between chulin and ba'alei mumin? Right? Ba'alei mumin la mechalefe, haneh mechalefe. No, there is still distinction, because something that has a blemish, you're not going to confuse it with another animal that doesn't have a blemish. You can see, right? It's missing a limb. It has a cut in its lip. That's a problem. Whereas an animal that's just not it's unblemished, but it was not consecrated. You can't see when you look at it if it's consecrated or not. So it can we could understand if he got confused and he switched a unconsecrated animal with one that was consecrated, and therefore that's an honest mistake. So patur. Okay, good. So v'ta'amad Rabbi Meir mishum achalufeh bela achalufeh. Okay, so this you explained this distinction between ba'amum and not ba'amum, between something that can be confused or in animals that are not confused. But before we had a different definition. When we wanted to figure out before what he says about a calf, he says even a calf is patur because he's thinking about it. He's preoccupied because he knows that this calf is going to be a sacrifice. He forgot that it's a Shalamim, he thought it was a Pesach. So, like, which one is it? Does it be Meir exempt when it's something that can be switched, or does he exempt when something that he's preoccupied because it is a sacrifice? What's his principle? Amale, he says both principles would exempt. Terid afagav de la mechalaf. If he's preoccupied with the animal, even though he wouldn't confuse it with something else, because obviously it looks different. A cow looks different from a lamb. Still patur. Mechalaf afagav de la tarid. If it's easily confused, even though he's not preoccupied because it's chulin, then also be patur. Lafuke ba'al emumin. The only exception would be something that has a blemish, because you wouldn't confuse it with the other one, and you're not thinking about it because it's not designated, and you know it's not a korban. And so in that case, since neither of the principles apply, that's when Rabbi Meir would be chayav. In all other cases, Rabbi Meir says patur. All right, good. So now that we finished with the Mishnah, but now we're going to go and look at a couple of some similar cases that as a machlokah between Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yohanan. And this will be a lot of fun. Yetib Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak. Akil'ad Rabbi Shemuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Okay, so these two rabbis are sitting on the porch of Rabbi Shemuel, and while they're there, and they said, they quoted Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. They quoted Lakish, who says, "Nitchalef lo shapud shel notar b'shabud shel sali v'achalo hayav." Someone who had, a spit of notar meat that's leftover, so that's prohibited. But there was another one of shel sali, of just roasted sacrificial meat, which is permitted. And he ate the wrong one. He ate the notar, thinking that it was kosher, sali, and he ate it, hayav. Why chayav? He thought he was doing something good by eating sacrificial meat, but it turns out he got the wrong one. So he didn't perform a mitzvah. So that person is chayav to bring a korban hatat. All right, so that's a simple case. Now, Rabbi Yohanan Amar, ishto nida ba'al hayav. If someone sleeps with his wife and she's nida, he didn't know that she was nida, but turns out she was, so it's a mistake, hayav, that person is hayav. However, if a case where, let's say, his brother died without children and he's obligated to do yibum, that's a mitzvah to do yibum. But this sister-in-law, the Yevama, she turns out to be a nida when he sleeps with her. So he violated nida, but he also did a mitzvah of yibum. In that case, patur, because that's Rabbi Yehoshua's principle. If you do something that you weren't supposed to do, right, by mistake, but you also performed the mitzvah in doing it, then you're exempt. So that explains the difference. There's no mitzvah to be with his wife, but there is a mitzvah to be with the Yevama. So in that case, patur. Okay, so that's a very interesting distinction. Now, how does Rabbi Yohanan, what would Rabbi Yohanan say about Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish? Would he agree or disagree? There's two interpretations. In this case, when he's with his wife, at least it's like a little mitzvah. It's you're supposed to be with your wife. Doesn't have to be specifically then or whatever. So, and in that case, chayav. So for sure, when he eats something that is notar and there's no mitzvah at all, he didn't do anything good by eating notar. For sure, he would be chayav, and so that he would agree with Resh Lakish. We might say that. Or others say, itamre, ba'hi patur. In the case of the meat, he actually would say patur. Why? My tama, hatamhu davale shayule. In the case of nida, his wife, he's chayav because you should have asked his wife. What do you mean? You're just going to go and be with your wife? Ask her first. Is the time of nida? Is it okay? Right? So therefore, he's liable. But in the case of these two spits, there was no one around to ask. Nobody knew. He took it out of the refrigerator. It was just the wrong one. He thought it was okay, and it ended up not being okay. So therefore, there's more reason to hold him liable in the case of eating the wrong meat than when he sleeps with his wife when she's nida. All right. Now, more cases. Rabbi Yohanan, Mai shena yevimto deka'aved mitzvah. Not more case, more analysis of Yochanan's case. What's the difference between when he's with when he sleeps with the Yevama? Well, he did a mitzvah, right? Okay, so since he did a mitzvah and he didn't know she was nida, he's okay, he's patur. But ishtoname kaved mitzvah. But he also performs a mitzvah when he's with his wife, right? Peru urvu. So he's doing mitzvah. He's going to have children, so he should be exempt as well. Answer: no, maybe his wife is pregnant, and so now when he's with her, so it's not going to lead to more children. So therefore, this was not an act of a mitzvah, and that's why he's chayav. All right, so it's true he not fulfilling peru revu since she's already pregnant. But there is a mitzvah of ona. You have to be with your wife on a regular schedule. No, shelo b'shat onata. It was not the time of the regular schedule. Depending on what a person's profession is and how often they're home, right? There's different halachot about that. Let's say once a week. Okay, so he already did the once a week, and now this is another time. So he's not he already fulfilled mitzvah of ona, and now he doesn't have to. That's why you're right. If it was ona, then it would be patur, but this was not, so therefore it was not a mitzvah. Wait, but that doesn't satisfy it either. No, the Rava says that a person should always make his wife happy. And so in additional times, besides the minimum amount of ona, whenever the wife wants, he should be with her, and that is also a mitzvah. So therefore, even though she was nida, but he didn't know, but he fulfilled the mitzvah anyway, so it should be patur. The answer is samuch levisata. No, it was near her expected date of her period. So therefore, he should have been more careful, and it's not a mitzvah, right? When during that time, one should separate from his wife, just in case she might become a nida. And so that's why there was no mitzvah of ona and no mitzvah according to Rava at all. All right. So if that's the case, and now we say that it was samuch levisata, then also being with the Yevama, he should have been more careful, because that's also a case where she was near the time when she's going to become a nida, and he should have found out and been more careful. So you could say there also that he should be liable. No, it's different. Yevimto bazez mina, ishto la bazez mina. The Yevama, he's embarrassed. He's shy. He's going to go ask his sister-in-law what time of the month it is. It's not nice to ask. So in that case, we can exempt him that he didn't know that she was about to be nida. But a person's not shy to ask his wife, what's going on? What's your schedule? And so therefore, he's more liable when he's with his wife, because he should have known that she was near the time of nida. He should have not been with her, and therefore there's no mitzvah at all regarding his wife in chayav. But Yevama, he ended up, it's true she was nida, but it was a mistake, and he did a mitzvah of yibum, and therefore he's patur from a korban. All right, so that's really very interesting distinctions there. And now the last thing we do for today is we look back at Rabbi Yohanan. This Rabbi Yohanan, he's an Amorah. We already had several Tanaim that talked about these cases. Who does Rabbi Yohanan follow? That's what we want to figure out. We're going to try 4 possibilities. We're going to end up saying that he doesn't follow precisely any of the Tanaim in his definition. Rabbi Yohanan keman, ilema keRabbi Yoseh. Titnan, Rabbi Yoseh omer, Yom Tov harishon shel chag shechal liot b'Shabbat, v'shachach v'hotzi et halulav l'rshut rabim, patur, mipnei she'osi b'rshut. You have the first day of Sukkot ends up being is on Shabbat, and the person forgot. If he forgot it's Shabbat, or forgot that you're not supposed to take the lulav, and he went and carried the lulav in Rishut Harabim, patur. Even though he violated Shabbat midoraita by carrying in public, nevertheless it was a mistake, and by carrying the lulav he fulfilled the mitzvah, right? Because actually midoraita, you only bring the lulav on the first day, so we're not supposed to do that. He did a mistake, but he fulfilled the mitzvah. Right? Because he fulfilled the mitzvah. So does Rabbi Yochanan agree with Rabbi Yoseh? Not necessarily, because in that case, you only have one day to fulfill the mitzvah d'oraita. So because he's thinking about it, is pressed for time. Oh, I better bring it. So he didn't have time to think it through clearly and say, oh, it's Shabbat, I don't bring it today. And that's why he's patur. But in the case of the Yevama, he doesn't have to do it that day. You could do it anytime. You could do Yibum anytime. So there, if he was not pressed for time, he should have taken more time to think about it and said, hold on, is this the right time? Is Shenida? And that's why Rabbi Yochanan actually is more lenient than Rabbi Yoseh. Rabbi Yoseh would not necessarily agree with Rabbi Yochanan. Maybe only exempts because it's pressed for time. Ve'ela, second try, ve'ela Rabbi Yehoshua dizbachim. Maybe he's talking about our Rabbi Yehoshua and our Mishnah, when he says that you take something that was going to be a shelamim and you make it a korban Pesach, and it ends up being a valid korban shelamim, and therefore patur. So this would be a similar case. No, that's also not similar. Also, there he's pressed for time because you can only, he thought it was a korban Pesach, so he has to bring it only on the 14th. And so that's why, because he's pressed for time, he made a mistake. It's not the same. Rabbi Yehoshua would not necessarily agree with that in the case of Yibum, where you have unlimited time to perform the mitzvah. So he should have been more careful and figured out that she might be nidah. Like Rabbi Yehoshua de tinakot. Oh, maybe Rabbi Yehoshua in the case of the babies, that's what he would agree with. When he took the Friday baby and he did it on Shabbat instead. So, and Yehoshua says patur because he ended up fulfilling a mitzvah. Would he agree? No, hatam nameh zemano bahul. No, there also, he thought that this is the 8th day, so he said, I have to do it on this day. So we didn't have time to go and figure out which is the right baby because he's pressed for time. But maybe in the case of Yevama, he would not agree. Okay, maybe it's Rabbi Yehoshua in another case we haven't seen yet of tiruma as follows. Ditnan haya ochel bat tiruma. Ben Girusha or Ben Chalusa. So person is a Kohen there, he's in the middle of eating teruma, and all of a sudden, while he's in the middle of the meal or afterwards, someone comes and tells him that his mother was a Girusha or a Chalusa, married to a Kohen, which means he's halal. As a halal, he's not allowed to eat teruma. And he realizes that now after he already ate the teruma. Rabbi Eliezer mechayeb keren machomesh. Yehoshua poter. Rabbi Eliezer says he's chayav, even though it was a mistake. Rabbi Yehoshua says patur because he still did a mitzvah, even though he's halal. He shouldn't have done that. Now that he did it already, it was a mistake, and he fulfilled the mitzvah of eating teruma. So that's similar to our cases. And see over here, there's no time limit. You eat teruma anytime. So this might be actually very similar to Rabbi Yohanan's case. Okay, have we finally found something that is the same as Rabbi Yohanan? Not necessarily. Dilma kedere bevai bar Abaye. Tamara bevai bar Abaye. But teruma be'arev haPesach dizemana bahul. No, this could be talking. He said that this is whole thing is talking about eating teruma on erev Pesach when it's chametz. And you have to eat it all before the 12th hour comes, the sixth hour comes, and that's why this case also his time is pressed. All right, that's one possible answer. Or another answer: Tiruma is called service. It's like Bet HaMikdash service, eating the tiruma, and there's a special exemption regarding any Bet HaMikdash service. Even if it was done by a halal, is someone not supposed to do it? Nevertheless, Hashem says it's okay. Not that's permitted, you weren't supposed to do that, but the service is valid. Where do we see that? In the Mishnah. Haya omed umakriv ditnan. Haya omed umakriv venodashu ben girusha or ben chalusa. This is a Kohen, he's up there and he's doing shechita, he's doing the sprinkling, he's performing the avodah in Bet HaMikdash, and then all of a sudden someone comes and says, oh, by the way, you didn't know, but your mother was a gerusha, and therefore you're a halal. What's the law? Kol hakorbanot kulan sheikriv al gabe mizbeach pesulin. So the Tanakama says all the sacrifices he did were no good. However, the Yehoshua machshir, and we're interested in Yehoshua, he says it's okay. ואמרינן, מה הייתה אמרת רבי יהושע? דכתיב, ברך אדוני חילו, ופועל ידיו תרסה. This is in Vezot HaBeracha. The blessing to Levi is, right, Hashem should bless his what he does, and all the works of his hands should be accepted. All the works of his hands, even if he ended up being a halal, nevertheless, it's permitted. So see, that's a little different than the case of Yibum that doesn't have this special exemption for the benefit of Kohanim. Okay, so we know that that's true regarding korbanot, that if a halal does it, it's still a valid korban. How do we know that applies to tiruma also? And tiruma is in fact called avodah, the Tanya. One day Rabbi Tarfon had not come to the Bet Midrash. The Shacharit Misaor Rabban Gamliel. So in the morning, Rabban Gamliel saw him. He said, how come last night you didn't come to the Bet Midrash? I was doing Bet HaMikdash service. Okay, they're living after the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed. So this is a funny answer. Says, everything you say is astonishing, right? I don't know what you're talking about. You're speaking in riddles. There's no Bet HaMikdash. There's no Bet HaMikdash service now. Avodat matana eten et kehunatchem b'hazad hakareb yumat. Asu achilat teruma begibulin kavodat bet hamikdash. Since the pasuk says, I have given you these gifts as a service, that means the teruma that people give to the Kohen is considered like temple service. And so therefore, I was even outside the Bet HaMikdash, I was eating teruma, so I had a valid excuse. That's why I didn't come to the Bet HaMidrash. I was eating teruma, which is like Bet HaMikdash service. And so that's where we learn that teruma is in fact like serving in the Bet HaMikdash, and serving in the Bet HaMikdash, even by a halal, we still is valid according to the Yehoshua. And so maybe the Yehoshua only said that someone who eats teruma not knowing that he's a halal is patur, because that's like Bet HaMikdash service. He wouldn't necessarily agree with the Yohanan, and so the Yohanan is a little bit more lenient than all of these Tanaim in saying that someone who performs yibum, even though she was nida, but he didn't know, still he performed the mitzvah, so he's extending Rabbi Yehoshua's principle even to a case where there is no time limit, and it's not part of Bet HaMikdash service. Okay, so many interesting cases and so many fine distinctions between different levels of doing things by mistake, but this very interesting principle that even when you do make a mistake, but you ended up performing a mitzvah, then that person would be patur from bringing the korban. Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen ve'amen.